Well, thank you. Jack Kennedy once said, "Life isn't fair," and I appreciate that comment more and more every day. And also, I think it's important to point out I was not elected again this year, Miss Congeniality in the United States Senate, because I have fought against the special interest. I have been responsible for reform measures. I have a long record of reaching across the aisle, whether it be my favorite Democrat, Joe Lieberman, or it would be Russ Feingold, or Ted Kennedy, or others, and I have a long record. And I investigated the Abramoff scandal, and there were some Republicans that didn't like the fact that I was doing that. And I fought against a tanker deal that was going to cost $6.2 billion additional of the taxpayers' money, and took on the special interest there. So I will try during this campaign, and that's what campaigns are about, to talk to the American people, tell them of my record, and tell them of my commitment to put my country first. But also, I have a record. I have a record of reaching across the aisle. I also have a record of being for reform of the institutions which have so badly been damaged and have so badly served us that the American people have so little regard for our institutions in Washington. And that bothers me. That bothers me. Because if all Americans lose trust and confidence in their government, then that has very unhealthy results over time. And the first thing that I want to do, as I said, is continue this path of reform so we can restore the trust and confidence of the American people. I guess the only other thing is that I've been asked several times if I would talk more about my past experiences, frankly, I'm a little reluctant to do that. I'd like to run on my record and my vision for the future of this country. Thank you for the question, and I'll try to do a better job throughout this campaign of informing people of my commitment and my plan of action.
Thank you. I have a teenage son who has a chronic disease. His current medications are about $80,000 a year. Even with our good insurance policy, we still pay many thousands. As he prepares to enter the workforce and not being an overachiever, we're looking at entry-level jobs without very good insurance policies. So this is a big issue for me. I'm petrified that he's not going to be able to afford his medications. So I want to know about healthcare reform.
Thank you. You know, I've had town hall meetings and forums on the issue of healthcare reform, so I probably won't go through all the details of the view that I have and the policies that I have, that we put the families in charge rather than the government. And if you like government-run healthcare programs, I suggest you go to Canada or England or some of the other countries that do before you embrace that proposal. But in the case of millions of Americans, such as your son, we understand that they are, quote, uninsurable. They're people with chronic diseases or disabilities, such as you point out. So we're going to have to, in that case, have government-approved plans. We're going to have to sit down with Governor Pawlenty in the legislature of Minnesota, and we're going to have to sit down with the legislatures and governors all over America, and we're going to say, okay, we've got a certain number of Americans who simply are not able to obtain, much less afford, health insurance. And we've got to establish risk pools. There has to be a contribution from the federal government, probably matched by the state government. And I'm confident that we will come up with a plan so that health care is affordable, particularly in that category of Americans such as you refer to. And I wish your son every success. And I know that this has been a challenge for you and your entire family, as well as your son. I'll try to fix those problems. I know that I can, and I believe, and I recognize them. I just wonder if the governor has a approach. Do you have an approach to that issue, Tim?
Well, as you may know, Minnesota is fortunate in relative terms because we have the lowest rate of uninsured in the country, and we have a robust set of supports here. But even Minnesota can do better. And one of the things that the senator is referencing is we have programs like medical assistance or Medicaid for folks who are, you know, in severe economic conditions. But if you fall in that gap, the so-called working poor, then you don't have the type of job where you have good health insurance, and perhaps you make a little too much income to qualify for, you know, the folks who are on the extremely low income programs or the disability programs. That's part of the gap that we have to address. And the senator's outlined a plan, not unlike we have in Minnesota. Individuals would be given financial assistance to go into the marketplace and purchase that. That would probably be turbocharged by a state component to it. And the type of risk pools that he is suggesting for those who might be harder to insure, we actually have in Minnesota demonstrated that, and they work pretty well. So I think what he's describing would work in other states or across the country as well.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Does that respond, or would you like to add anything? No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
First of all, Senator, I'd like to compliment you on your tie. And beyond that, yesterday you called for an expansion of nuclear power, and again today in your third point. And I actually had the privilege of seeing the Skipjack and the Triton launched, but whether it's our nuclear submarines sailing around the world safely or our history in Minnesota of safe use of nuclear power plants, we have a problem there where your approach in oil drilling to allow the states sort of opt-in, opt-out hasn't worked. And as a senator from a southwestern state, you know what I mean, the spent storage problem. We have a problem with temporary storage in Minnesota, and certainly on the national level. Would you approach that issue concurrently with the siting of new power plants, or do you have some idea as to how we could solve both the federal permanent storage and the state temporary storage issues?
Thank you. I think that we have to store and we have to reprocess. I think we have to do both. I think one of the worst decisions was made by President Carter back in the 70s when he said we would not reprocess spent nuclear fuel. The French do it. The Europeans do it. Other countries do it. 80% of the French electricity is generated by nuclear power. Now, we always like to imitate the French. And by the way, in case you hadn't noticed, they now have a pro-American president of France, which shows if you live long enough, anything can happen, and he's a great guy. I think we have to do both. I've always favored Yucca Mountain. Now, I understand that the legal challenges have to be addressed. You can't just go in there and not have all of the problems and challenges addressed. But if it's not Yucca Mountain, then it's got to be someplace. But also, there's so much of it laying around now that you're going to have to do both. Reprocessed spent nuclear fuel is something that is done worldwide. And there's an idea that the Russians have had, which also addresses part of the problem with Iran, that we could establish an international site where you could take spent nuclear fuel and reprocess it. This is obviously the major reason for that is to prevent the spread of materials that could be used to make nuclear weapons. So I'm sorry to give you a long answer. We have to reprocess, we have to store, and again, because you're obviously knowledgeable about this, my friends, when we're talking about threats to our security, if you have spent nuclear fuel sitting around nuclear power plants all over America, you've got a great danger there. It's a national security issue. But people, and so we can't be satisfied with the status quo. Did you want to add to that? Yeah.
I think that's fine. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say welcome to the state of Minnesota, Senator, and we're really glad to have you here. And as the state of Minnesota, we're of course known as the land of 10,000 lakes. We're starting to become, I think, known as the land of 10,000 energy resources, and Governor Pawlenty has been working a lot on different energy resources. I'd like to know what you would set as President of the United States, a direction for new alternative energy sources so we could, again, move away from our foreign oil commitments and problems. And really, I think that situation is going to take great leadership to get it done. And we're looking to you for that leadership.
Thank you. Wind, tide, solar, nuclear, a battery that we should be investing in and Detroit tells us that they're close to, that will take a car 100 or 200 miles before it has to be plugged in, and then that recharging is relatively brief. I won't ask for a show of hands, but I'll bet you that if somebody said, we would provide you with an affordable automobile that would take you over 100 miles before you have to plug it in again, and by the way, the price has got to come down, as we know, then I think literally every American would embrace it. It's not an accident, and the auto manufacturers are starting to react. I'm sure you may have seen where General Motors said they were going to stop manufacturing SUVs and they're going to start manufacturing the Volt, which is, the technology isn't quite there yet, but I have confidence in it. So I think it's got to be a combination of all of those things, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and where pure research and development is required by the federal government, that's a proper role. The internet came into being because of federal funding. There are many other things that have come into being. Once we complete the government research and development funding, then let the free enterprise system run with it. But we're going to have to invest more. We are spending on research and development about $4 billion a year. That is less than 3 days of our tab for imported oil. So we need to make those investments. And again, I just want to point out, we are the most innovative entrepreneurial nation in the world, despite the problems that we are in today. And the President of the United States speaks directly to the American people and said, my friends, we're going to become energy independent, and lay out all the reasons for it, and we're going to conserve also. I think the American people will not only react positively, they will react with enthusiasm. Thank you.